My stepbrother threw me out during my stepfather's funeral and declared the inheritance was his, but my will reveal shattered his arrogance forever. At 38 years old, Jake never imagined I would be getting ready for the burial of my stepfather. Memories sweep back like a tidal wave as I sit here, organizing old pictures and planning. Death seems to cause one to consider a lifetime of events, both positive and negative. At 9 years old, my mother, Sarah, married Richard, my stepfather. The wedding day seems to me like yesterday. Mom looked lovely in her simple white outfit, hope beaming in her eyes for a fresh start. Richard, on the other hand, seemed to stress his austere attitude by wearing a black suit, even on what ought to have been a happy occasion. He insisted on a solemn demeanor that I would come to know all too well over the years. Richard was a rigid man right from the beginning, particularly when he turned to face me. He always seemed to be permanently frowning. Often I questioned whether he simply lacked the means to relate to a child who wasn't his own, or if he harbored resentment at having to assume the position of stepfather. Growing up with Richard was not easy. From my grades to my wardrobe to even how I handled my fork at meals, he criticized everything I did. "You need to work harder, or this cruel world will chew you up and spit you out," he said almost daily. Looking back, I wonder if Dad was attempting to equip me for life in his own flawed manner, even if at the time I believed he was just being harsh. His rigidity permeated every sphere of our life. I had to sit up straight, use the proper fork, and only speak when spoken to during family gatherings. Any departure from his expectations was greeted with a stinging stare or a harsh correction. Family vacations, which ought to have been lighthearted and leisurely, were more like military drills than pleasurable excursions. Richard would schedule everything down to the last minute. Heaven help us should we stray from the plan. One vacation, I recall, we missed a turn and arrived at a museum 15 minutes late. For the rest of the day, Richard was in a terrible mood, grumbling about lost time and inadequate preparation. Everything changed 3 years following the wedding when my stepbrother Michael was born. Richard suddenly had his own son, and it was abundantly clear who his favorite was. He poured love and compliments on Michael. Richard's smile, unlike anything I'd seen until he held his newborn child, revealed a part of him I never knew existed, like a switch had been turned on. I was envious and furious. At 12 years old, I couldn't comprehend why Michael received all the love and attention while I only got harsh looks and criticism. The difference was clear and agonizing. Michael's achievements, no matter how small, were honored with great celebration, even if they were unremarkable. My own successes were greeted with a nod and a remark on how I could improve next time. When I protested to Mom about the unfair treatment, she would try to reassure me. "Richard loves you too, Jake," she would say, her eyes begging me to understand. "That's just tough love. He wants you ready for the world." Still, it didn't feel like love to me. It seemed like continual disappointment, as Richard saw me always falling short. Our family dynamic changed in ways I never would have predicted throughout the years. Mom became ill at 25, and we all gathered around her. Richard stayed stoic even then, but I sensed compassion when he thought nobody else was looking. When Mom thought I wasn't in the room, I would observe him softly adjusting her pillows or clutching her hand. It was the first time I understood that Richard's lack of affection could have been more a result of his personal constraints than of his sentiments for us. 2 years later, Mom passed away, and it felt as though the glue keeping our family intact had broken. Tears and quiet prayers defined the funeral. Richard stood like a monument all through the service, his face a blank mask. Though the wall between us seemed insurmountable, I longed for some indication of approval from the man who had been my father figure for most of my life. Looking after Richard in his later years was difficult, fighting the restrictions his aging body placed on him. He was as tenacious and critical as always. There were days when our conflict was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But occasionally, too, I felt brief sparks of thanks in his eyes, like the time I stayed up all night with him during a sick spell or when I learned to make his favorite foods as he grew too frail to stand at the stove himself. Those were rare moments, though, and most of the time, I felt as though I was looking after a stranger who happened to live in my house. We were living in a tense truce, neither of us entirely sure how to close the distance that had widened between us over the years. Richard's character made me never even consider entering a relationship or getting married. I wanted none of the same issues I was experiencing for my wife or girlfriend to confront. Richard passed away at 65, taken unexpectedly in the evening from a heart attack. Everyone is showing their respect as I get ready for his burial. Michael arrived with Emma and their children, Lily, 5 years old, and Max, 3 years old. I hadn't seen him in years until now. Though he seems older and more austere than I recall from our early years, He exudes entitlement about everything. The funeral was a depressing event. I stood there listening to people talk about Richard, a fantastic man who always placed family first, a pillar of the community. And I wanted to find humor in the irony of it all, knowing the same man I did. To me, the Richard they described seemed to be a stranger. Michael drew me aside as folks were departing once it was all over. I considered that perhaps he wished to assist each other in our sadness, to reconnect, or to share memories of our childhood. Instead, he delivered a startling blow that left me reeling. "So, about the house," he said, his voice laid back as though we were talking about the weather. "I'll need you to leave by the end of the month." Not sure I heard him correctly, I glanced at him. "What are you talking about?" He groaned and cast an intentionally obtuse glance at me. Clearly, the house. Dad turned it over to me ultimately. "I am his genuine son. You never imagined he would leave it to you." I felt as though I had been gut-punched. This was how it turned out. All those years of trying to be the son Richard wanted, and of looking after him. Part of me wanted to fight for what I felt I had earned over years of conscientious living, but another side of me, the one still feeling like that 9-year-old lad yearning for affirmation, wanted to withdraw. "Fine," I answered, my voice empty. "I'll be out by the end of the month. Not only for Richard, but for the family I never really had. For the bond I had always hoped would grow between Richard and me, but never did." As I watched Michael walk away, arm around Emma, kids running ahead, I felt the weight of it all. That evening, I began packing among boxes of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to save. Sorting through years of accumulated belongings, I couldn't help but wonder whether Richard had been right all along. Sometimes, you still ended up with nothing to show for it. The world was harsh. I moved out of my childhood house a week ago. For now, Mom's sister Linda is here with me, trying to decide what to do next. Thinking about Michael and how we got here, I lie awake at night staring at the foreign ceiling. Michael obviously was the preferred child growing up. Richard doted on him in a way he never did with me from the time he was born. Birthday celebrations with all his friends invited, new toys just because, proud smiles when he brought home a good report card. All things I had longed for but never received. I recall one birthday when Michael was around 8 years old. Richard hired an entire arcade for his buddies and himself. At the time, I was 17 and couldn't help but contrast it with my own birthdays, which often featured a quiet meal and perhaps a small gift. But as Michael aged, something changed. The sweet little lad who used to follow me about, wanting to play, developed into a depressed adolescent who appeared to hate everything and everyone. He started to treat me like I was invisible and spoke angrily back to our parents. It was like seeing a stranger seize my little brother's body. One specific occasion comes to mind when he was around 16. Richard asked us about his grades when we were having dinner, a regular inquiry he made of us both. Michael burst this time, though. He began screaming about how he despised living under Richard's control and how sick he felt of the pressure. He bolted from the house, slamming the door so fiercely a picture fell from the wall. Richard seemed to be sitting there, looking older and sadder than I had ever seen him, instead of the angry man I had anticipated would pursue Michael and drag him back. Michael's behavior only became worse as he grew older. He began courting a series of girls, each relationship ending badly. Late nights, missing curfews, and shouting battles with Richard that rocked the home abounded. I tried to keep out of it, but the continual stress would inevitably affect me. Michael laughed it off when Richard tried to discuss respect and duty. "You can't control me anymore," he would say, and Richard would get this expression, a mix of wrath and despair that I had never seen before. Then came the day he turned up with Emma as his bride. Not even among us knew he was seeing someone seriously, let alone getting ready for marriage. Walking in with Emma, little more than a teenager herself, he said they had eloped. I shall never forget Richard's expression. For once, he was silent. Mom tried to calm things down and welcome Emma into the family, but the air was clearly charged. Richard seemed to be straining to keep his cool and to find the proper words to speak to his son. Emma claimed she wanted to live free from family meddling. Apart, Michael thus packed his luggage and left, simply as that. He pledged to visit and keep in touch, but those pledges soon dropped off the list. Weeks became months devoid of his communication. His calls were always quick and often tinged with conflict. I assumed definitely he would come back when Mom fell ill, but he did not. He asked periodically how she was doing, but always had a reason for why he couldn't visit. Work was hectic, the kids were sick, the car was in the shop. Something was always there. I recall sitting next to Mom's hospital bed and seeing her eyes flash every time the phone rang, hoping it would be Michael. More often than not, it wasn't. It was I who had to phone Mom to let her know she died. He sounded very offended, full of regret for not visiting more frequently. He claimed he would try to make it to the funeral, but ultimately did not show up, just a flower arrangement delivered to the funeral home, accompanied by a card offering his sympathies. Feeling his absence like a physical hurt, I stood at the burial, wondering how we had become so far apart. And now, here we are, not motivated by love or obligation. The prodigal son returns for what he can gain. Thinking about how he swooped in and grabbed the house, acting as though he had some right to do so when he had left us years earlier, makes me enraged. I consider all the evenings I spent tending to Richard, all the doctor's visits I accompanied, all the meals I made, and all the expenses I paid, and for what? To be thrown aside, just like I never really mattered at all. But as I'm staggered in these terrible thoughts, my phone rings. It is Mr. Thompson, Richard's attorney, telling me he has to talk about something vital. He sounds serious and asks me to come back to the house tomorrow. Uncertain of what to believe, part of me hopes there's a mistake, and maybe I won't have to abandon my house after all. Knowing how let down I have been in the past, another side of me is terrified to hope. I wonder what tomorrow will hold as I hang up the phone. Whatever it is, I am clear on one thing: this is not going to be easy. I toss and turn the remainder of the night, my head ablaze with possibilities. Something so crucial that Mr. Thompson had to see me personally. Did Richard leave something for me after all? Is it conceivable? Alternatively, is this only another letdown in a long line of disappointments? Feeling like a stranger, I stood before my childhood house the next day. To my astonishment, Michael's car was also in the driveway already. Breathing deeply, I entered. The familiar creak of the front door sent a pulse through me. Sitting at the dining room table, Mr. Thompson had a stack of documents before him. There were Michael and Emma as well, clearly agitated, with his demeanor unreadable. The attorney motioned for me to sit down. Seated, I was well aware of the tension in the room. "Thank you all for coming," he said with a firm, businesslike voice. "I know this is a tough period, but there are some crucial issues about Richard's will we should talk about." Michael leaned forward, a smug grin on his face. "Let's wrap this up. I would want to start right away, as I have plans for this home." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, seeming uncomfortable. "We should really talk about that. Richard's will states that Jake has been left the house, and in fact all of his possessions." The room went still. For a time I felt as though I couldn't breathe. Had I heard him correctly? After all these years of believing I was never good enough, Richard had left everything to me. The first to react was Michael. "What?" he yelled, leaping to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward. "That's not possible. I'm his real son. He wouldn't hand everything to Jake." Mr. Thompson stayed calm under Michael's rage. "I'm rather sorry, but it's quite clear. Richard's will specifically says that Jake is to inherit all of his possessions, including the house, his savings, and his personal items." What I was hearing defied belief. It seemed illogical, those years of criticism, of feeling as though I could never measure up, and now this. Michael was pacing now, his face flushed with rage. "This is nuts. When he wrote this, he must have been insane. I'll dispute it. I'll bring this before court." Mr. Thompson gave a headshake. "That is not what I would counsel. Richard prepared this will rather carefully. He included a letter outlining his choice, and it was attested and notarized. Challenging it effectively would be quite difficult." Michael turned to face me, his eyes flaming with resentment. "You did this, didn't you? You somehow twisted him against me." Still in disbelief myself, I raised my hands. "I knew nothing about any of this. I assumed he was leaving everything to you." Before things could get much more heated, Mr. Thompson stepped in. "If I may, I think Richard's letter might help to clarify his choice." Pulling out an envelope, he started to read. "To my sons, should you be reading this, I am gone. Though I hope I can clarify. I know you too may find my choice shocking. I have made many mistakes over my life. Among my largest was not treating both of my sons equally. In terms of love, I expected too much from Jake, was too demanding, never showed enough affection, and I treated Michael too kindly. I never set appropriate limits or imparted any lessons of value. As I considered my life in my last years, I came to see something crucial. A real son is defined by behavior rather than blood. And in that sense, Jake behaved as a real son ought to do. He stayed with me through trying circumstances and looked after me, even when I didn't deserve it. All the traits I attempted to teach but failed to show myself, patience, kindness, and responsibility, he exhibited. I am thus leaving everything to him, not as a punishment to Michael, but rather as a tribute to the son who truly embodied the ideals I cherish. I hope you both have the compassion to see and pardon the errors of an elderly man." The room went still once Mr. Thompson finished reading. Tears came to me, a lifetime of feelings rising inside me. All those years I felt Richard didn't care, that he considered me a disappointment, but he had been observing, noting, valuing in his own unique sense. Michael froze momentarily, his face a mask of shock and rage. Then he silently seized Emma's hand, rushed out, and slammed the door behind him. His automobile started up and screeched out of the driveway, the last act of disobedience. Turning to me, Mr. Thompson wore a gentle smile. "I know this is a lot to absorb, Jake," he continued. "Richard expressed his preferences quite precisely. He wished for you a safe future, free from financial concerns." I nodded, still not sure I understood exactly what had transpired. "Thank you," I managed to say. "I need some time to consider all this." Mr. Thompson paused as he neatly folded his documents. "There is still one more item. Your stepfather left you a personal note as well. Would you like to read it in private?" he questioned. He gave me an envelope with my name written in Richard's recognizable handwriting on it. I took it, knowing that within were words I had waited a lifetime to hear. With shaky hands, I sat by myself in the quiet house, flipping the envelope in my hands after Mr. Thompson departed. At last, I plucked up the courage to open it and read. "Dear Jake, though I know I've never been excellent at communicating my emotions, hopefully, this letter will help to offset some of my faults. I'm proud of the man you have evolved into, though I failed as a parent. I had a challenging upbringing and was never taught appropriate affectionate behavior. I reasoned that the best way to equip you for life was to be rigorous and challenge you. I regret the suffering I caused you now. I understand I was mistaken, particularly in these last several years. Your compassion and commitment have shown me what actual strength and integrity look like. You, now more than ever, reflect a man I always dreamed you would be. I apologize for not telling you these things when I was living. With my last wishes in this letter, maybe you will have some peace and protection. Remember yourself, son. You are deserving of all the joy available. Love, Richard." Tears streamed down my face as I closed the letter. All those years of feeling inadequate, of thinking Richard didn't care, and now this, it was overpowering. Over the next few days, I battled to make sense of everything. Once a cause of stress and bad memories, the house felt different now. It belonged to me in a deeper sense, as much as legally. It was evidence of Richard's affection, sincere if spoken too late. Michael hasn't gotten in touch since he departed that day. I'm not sure whether he will, though I know it will take time. Part of me hopes we can reconcile someday. The pain is still raw, and our distance seems greater than it did years ago. I have given family, the complexity of love, and the numerous ways people show it a lot of thought. Though often harsh, Richard's love was sincere. It was flawed in his own sense. He was working to equip me for life and build my resilience, though I wish he could have discovered a softer approach. I now better understand him. Regarding the inheritance, it goes beyond just money and real estate. It carries responsibility. Richard trusted me to continue his legacy and to live the ideals he valued. Although it's a difficult task, I'm resolved to meet expectations. I have chosen to create a scholarship fund in Richard's name from a portion of the bequest. It's for children from difficult situations so they may have the education and chances they might otherwise miss. Taking the teachings he imparted to me and paying them forward seems like the proper approach to honor his memory. I'm still trying to make sense of everything as I sit here now in the house that turned unexpectedly into mine. Fathers and sons have a complex relationship, marked by frequently unsaid feelings and misunderstandings. Richard and I never had the relationship I wanted when he was alive, but his last act has given me an opportunity to better know him, to see the love always there, buried under the surface. I wish Dad had told me these things during his lifetime. We could have had talks, cleared the air, perhaps even created the relationship I so yearned for. But life does not always provide us tidy ends or flawless closure. Right now, I'm concentrating on respecting Richard's memory by practicing the ideals he sought to inculcate in me. Work hard, be conscientious, and, most importantly, love those who matter. I'm glad to be carrying on a legacy. Looking ahead, I experience a range of emotions: sadness for what was lost, thankfulness for what I have, and hope for what is to come. Richard's unexpected legacy has given me a fresh perspective on family, love, and forgiveness, in addition to financial stability. Though I never expected it, this is a new chapter in my life, and I am ready to face it, bearing with me the lessons of the past and hope for a better future. That might ultimately be the best inheritance of all.